There's a number most people never ask their doctor for, not their cholesterol, not their blood pressure, their coronary calcium score, a direct photograph, essentially, of the plaque already sitting in their arteries. I want you to imagine two patients, both 52, both with normal cholesterol on paper. One has a calcium score of 0. The other has a score in the hundreds, meaning plaque has been quietly accumulating for probably 15 years, undetected, undiscussed, invisible on every routine blood panel they've ever had. Here is the part that should genuinely unsettle you. By the time chest pain shows up, you are usually looking at decades of buildup, not weeks. Atherosclerosis is not an event. It's a slow negotiation between what you eat, how you move, and how your body responds to inflammation, one that's been running since long before anyone told you to watch your cholesterol. The good news, and the actual point of this video, is that this negotiation can be renegotiated. Plaque is not necessarily a one-way street. There is real, published evidence, not wellness influencer evidence, actual randomized trials, that specific interventions can slow, stabilize, and in some cases shrink existing plaque. So today I'm not giving you a diet. I'm giving you 4 pillars backed by the strongest research we have that each attack a different mechanism of how plaque actually forms. Understand the mechanism, and you'll understand exactly why these interventions work, which matters far more than memorizing a food list. Why just eat clean isn't good enough advice. Every few months, a new diet claims to be the definitive cure for heart disease: keto, carnivore, vegan, Mediterranean. The truth, after years of sitting across the table from patients trying to make sense of all of it, is that the best diet is the one that survives contact with real life. A wedding season, a stressful quarter at work, a holiday in Tuscany. A theoretically perfect regimen you abandon in April is worth less than a good enough regimen you're still doing at Christmas. So rather than hand you a meal plan, I want to hand you something more durable, an understanding of the actual biology so you can build your own plan around it, one elegant enough to be sustainable and precise enough to work. The mechanism, how plaque actually builds. Strip away the marketing and atherosclerosis comes down to a 4-act sequence. 1. The delicate inner lining of your blood vessels, the endothelium, sustains damage. 2. Small LDL particles, particularly the ones carrying a protein called ApoB, slip through that damaged lining. 3. Those particles oxidize, and oxidized LDL is what actually triggers the alarm. 4. Your immune system sends in cleanup crews, macrophages, that try to clear the damage but instead get trapped, swell up, and become part of the plaque itself. Every pillar in this video interrupts this sequence somewhere. That's the organizing logic, not these foods are good for you in some vague sense, but this specific compound blocks this specific step. Pillar 1, color your plate to fight oxidation. The oxidation step above is where a specific class of plant pigments does its best work: carotenoids, and in particular lycopene, the compound responsible for the deep red of tomatoes, watermelon, pink grapefruit, and guava. Lycopene is one of the most efficient antioxidants your diet can supply. Since oxidized LDL is the trigger for the immune cascade, neutralizing the oxidation before it happens is a genuinely upstream intervention. Population research, including a well-known Finnish cohort, has linked higher lycopene and tomato product intake with measurably less carotid plaque. Cooked and concentrated tomato products, incidentally, tend to have more bioavailable lycopene than raw tomatoes, which is a pleasant excuse for a proper bolognese. The elegant version, a daily habit of something deeply red or pink, a rich tomato sauce, roasted red peppers, watermelon in season, pink grapefruit at breakfast. Pillar 2, let your liver do the heavy lifting. Here's a fact that surprises most patients. The cholesterol circulating in your blood is overwhelmingly manufactured by your own liver, not delivered by your dinner plate, which means the most efficient way to lower it isn't necessarily eating less cholesterol. It's convincing your liver to pull more LDL out of circulation on its own. This is precisely what phytosterols do. Structurally, they're nearly identical to cholesterol, so in the intestine, they compete with it for absorption. found richly in flaxseed, sesame seeds, walnuts, legumes, oats, and avocado. Less cholesterol absorbed signals the liver to compensate by drawing more LDL, the particles that carry ApoB, out of your bloodstream. Meta-analyses converge on a genuinely meaningful effect here, roughly a 14 milligrams per deciliter average LDL reduction, and ApoB carrying LDL is one of the most consistently implicated drivers of atherosclerosis across Mendelian randomization studies, about as close to causal proof as cardiovascular research gets. The elegant version, a spoonful of ground flaxseed folded into yogurt or porridge, a handful of walnuts as your default snack, sesame worked into a dressing rather than an afterthought. I'll close with a caveat I give every patient in clinic because I think it matters more than any single food on this list. Nothing here replaces knowing your own numbers. A calcium score, a lipid panel that actually includes ApoB, and a conversation with your own physician about where you personally stand, that's the foundation everything else sits on. These pillars work with real published evidence behind them, but they work on your specific biology, and I can't see your blood work from here. If today's the day you finally book that conversation with your doctor or ask for the calcium score you've never had run, that's the most useful thing you'll do this month, arguably more useful than anything else in this video. I'll see you in the next one. Pillar 3, calm the inflammatory response. Once oxidized LDL is sitting in your vessel wall, the next act is inflammation, arterial walls becoming, in effect, sticky, recruiting immune cells that accelerate plaque growth. This is where flavonoids, found in berries, apples, citrus, onions, leafy greens, and dark chocolate, do their most important work by reducing the expression of the adhesion molecules that make vessel walls sticky in the first place. Less stickiness, fewer recruited immune cells, less inflammation, slower plaque growth. One flavonoid subclass deserves particular mention: the catechins in green and black tea. A meta-analysis pooling 9 prospective studies found that 3 or more cups of tea daily was associated with a 21% lower risk of stroke compared with less than 1 cup. A striking figure for something this simple to adopt. Then there's extra virgin olive oil, which arguably deserves its own pillar. Its polyphenols and monounsaturated fats are anti-inflammatory and antioxidant simultaneously, help repair the damaged endothelium directly, and appear to improve insulin sensitivity, meaning olive oil is quietly working on several fronts of this process at once. Large observational cohorts consistently link higher olive oil intake with fewer major cardiovascular events. The elegant version, extra virgin olive oil as your default fat, a proper pot of green or black tea replacing at least 1 sugary drink, a square of dark chocolate rather than a guilty afterthought. Pillar 4, stabilize what's already there. The final piece addresses plaque that already exists, and the goal here shifts slightly, not just preventing new plaque, but making existing plaque less likely to rupture, which is the event that actually causes heart attacks and strokes. Fatty fish, salmon, mackerel, sardines are rich in the omega-3s EPA and DHA. Clinical research shows people eating fatty fish 1 to 3 times weekly have a meaningfully lower risk of cardiovascular events, and one of the largest long-running atherosclerosis studies found higher DHA levels linked to a 12% lower risk of carotid plaque progression. Omega-3s calm the immune overreaction driving plaque growth and boost nitric oxide production, which helps stabilize existing plaque against rupture. The elegant version, fatty fish 2 to 3 times a week, not as a chore, but as the default answer to what's for dinner. The imposters, what's marketed as heart healthy but isn't a few products, deserve particular skepticism because they've been dressed up in health-conscious packaging. Flavored yogurts, frequently loaded with added sugar behind a protein-rich label. Plain, full-fat yogurt with your own fruit or a drizzle of honey is the better choice. Granola and breakfast bars marketed on fiber and whole grains, while the ingredient panel tells a very different story about added sugar. Fruit juice, even the no added sugar kind, Natural sugar consumed without the fiber of whole fruit is absorbed rapidly and in concentrated form. The fiber in whole fruit is doing real protective work that a glass of juice simply discards. Beyond the plate, two interventions worth your time exercise. Most forms of movement help cardiovascular health broadly, but one specific protocol has actual trial evidence for reversing existing plaque, not merely preventing new plaque. Supervised high intensity interval training. A randomized trial published in the European Journal of Preventive Cardiology found 6 months of supervised HIIT produced plaque volume regression, modestly outperforming what's typically seen with statin therapy alone in that trial. Atherosclerosis develops over decades, so we can't yet say how this translates to long term outcomes, but the early data is genuinely compelling. Aged garlic extract. This is the one supplement I'll actually recommend on camera because the evidence is unusually solid for a supplement. A double blind randomized trial showed it can stabilize vulnerable plaque, and a separate randomized trial found a year of supplementation was associated with slower progression of coronary artery calcification and improved blood pressure. And one refined addition to the routine for those with access to it: sauna therapy. The evidence here is indirect rather than direct. No trial has shown plaque regression from sauna use specifically, but there's a consistent link between regular sauna bathing and improved endothelial function, along with meta analyses showing measurable blood pressure benefits and associations with lower all cause mortality. Not proof, but a compelling enough signal to make it a worthwhile addition if you have the means. Bringing the four pillars together. To summarize the architecture, since each pillar targets a distinct step in how plaque forms. Pillar 1, lycopene-rich foods to neutralize the oxidation that triggers the immune cascade. Pillar 2, phytosterols to let your liver. Before we go further, one detour worth taking, because I'd be doing you a disservice to leave it out. Everything we've discussed so far responds to lifestyle. There's one driver of plaque that largely doesn't: lipoprotein A or LPA. It's genetically determined, it's measured with a single blood test that almost nobody orders as part of a routine panel, and if your levels are elevated, it changes how aggressively you should be thinking about everything else on this list. I'm not going to pretend diet meaningfully moves this number. It doesn't, in most people. But knowing it is often the difference between a patient who casually incorporates these habits and one who treats them as non-negotiable. Ask for it once. You only need to know it once. We've talked about phytosterols competing with cholesterol for absorption. There's a second, quieter mechanism running alongside it: fiber, specifically the soluble, viscous kind found in oats, barley, chia, and legumes, binds bile acids in the gut and drags them out with it. Your liver, needing to replace those bile acids, pulls cholesterol out of circulation to manufacture more. It's a different door into the same room as Pillar 2. There's a second order benefit here too. Fiber is fermented by gut bacteria into short chain fatty acids, and one of them, butyrate, appears to have a calming effect on the same inflammatory pathways we discussed with flavonoids. The gut microbiome and arterial inflammation are increasingly understood to be in conversation with each other, not two separate systems. The elegant version: a base of oats or barley a few mornings a week, lentils folded into whatever you'd otherwise make with rice. Here's a nuance that surprises even patients who've done their homework. Calcium doesn't only build bone. If it ends up in the wrong place, it can also contribute to arterial calcification, the hardening component of plaque. Vitamin K2, found in fermented foods like natto and aged cheeses, activates a protein that essentially directs calcium toward bone and away from your arteries. It's not going to headline anyone's diet plan, but it's the kind of unglamorous detail that separates a well-researched approach from a superficial one. I want to be honest with you about something. You can execute every pillar in this video flawlessly and still undermine yourself with 5 hours of sleep a night. Chronic sleep restriction elevates inflammatory markers, disrupts blood pressure regulation overnight, and has been associated in cohort studies with greater coronary calcium progression. It doesn't compete for airtime the way food does because there's no product to sell around it, but mechanistically, it belongs in the same conversation as everything above. Treat 7 to 8 hours as a clinical intervention, not a lifestyle indulgence. For years, the message was a glass of red wine, nightly might even help your heart, the polyphenols, the resveratrol, all of it. The more recent and more rigorous data, including Mendelian randomization studies that strip out confounding, has walked that back considerably. Alcohol doesn't appear to offer the cardioprotective benefit once claimed, and at higher intakes, it raises blood pressure and contributes to the very oxidative stress we've spent this entire script trying to reduce. If you enjoy wine, enjoy it, but I'd rather you hear this from me than continue believing it's doing your arteries a favor. None of this works as a list you read once and forget. So here's the version I actually give patients, structured around the pillars rather than as a rigid meal plan. Breakfast leans on oats or full-fat yogurt built around flaxseed and something red, berries, or pink grapefruit. Lunch defaults to olive oil as the fat, a legume or two, and whatever vegetables are in season. Dinner rotates fatty fish 2 or 3 times a week, with the remaining nights built around a tomato-based sauce or a version with walnuts and greens. Tea replaces at least one sugary drink daily. Garlic, ideally aged extract or simply cooked generously into meals, becomes a standing habit rather than an occasional flourish. And twice a week, if your body permits it, the higher intensity movement we discussed earlier. That's the entire architecture. Nothing on this list requires you to abandon a dinner party or turn down a proper meal in Tuscany. It requires consistency across a season, not perfection across a day.